The forest is awake. What time is it where you are? And from where do you listen? Welcome to Night Whispers. Subscribe and hear what hides in the dark. The summer stretched out before me like a promise of adventure. I was staying at my grandma's house, a place so remote, it felt like the edge of the world. The air was thick with pine and wildflowers, and the sound of cicadas hummed in the background, fading as the evening settled in. My cousins and I, 4 of us in total, had spent most of August chasing thrills. I was the oldest, at 15, and I loved the role of protector, the one who wouldn't back down when things got spooky. It was a few weeks into our stay when we decided to push things further. We had a fire going in the backyard, the flames flickering and spitting sparks as we sat in a loose circle. The trees loomed beyond the edge of the light, thick and black, as if the forest could swallow us whole if we let it. My cousins, ages 10, 13, and 14, huddled closer, their eyes wide as we took turns telling ghost stories. It felt good to be scared in the safety of the firelight, to laugh afterward and shake it off. But that night, we wanted something more. The idea started innocently enough: truth or dare. We all knew the game, and I had a reputation for not backing down. My 14-year-old cousin grinned at me, mischief in his eyes. "I dare you and Danny to walk the forest path," he said, nodding to our 13-year-old cousin. 10 minutes, no flashlight. I didn't hesitate. I stood up, brushing off my jeans, and looked at Danny. He swallowed, eyes darting to the dark tree line, but then he nodded. I gave him a reassuring smile, and together, we stepped away from the warmth of the campfire and into the shadows. The path was narrow, and the further we walked, the more the forest seemed to close in around us. The air turned cooler, the sounds of the night muffled, as if the trees were swallowing every whisper. I could hear Danny's breathing beside me, fast and shallow. I tried to stay calm for both of us, but something about the silence felt off. There were no insects, no rustling leaves, nothing but the crunch of our footsteps on the gravelly trail. 5 minutes in, I turned to Danny. "We should head back," I said, my voice barely louder than a whisper. He nodded quickly, relief flooding his face. But just as we turned, I saw it. A shape loomed in the middle of the path, barely visible in the dim light. My breath caught in my throat and I grabbed Danny's arm, yanking him to a stop. It was large, hunched, its form twisted in ways that made my stomach clench. For a second I thought it might be a dog, but then it shifted, and the firelight glinted off its face. A face that shouldn't have existed. The creature had a head like a man's, with hollow, glowing white eyes that bore into me, as if it could see all the way to my soul. Its body was covered in mangy fur, twisted like a dog, but its hands were human. Elongated fingers that curled towards the ground, twitching slightly. My heart pounded in my chest, a primal fear rooting me in place. The air turned cold, and a low growl rumbled from its throat, vibrating through the earth beneath us. Danny made a noise, a strangled gasp, and that seemed to snap me out of it. I turned, grabbing his arm, and we ran. Branches whipped at my face, my feet barely touching the ground as we tore through the forest. The campfire's glow, our only beacon. I could hear something behind us, crashing through the underbrush, the sound growing louder with every step. I didn't dare look back. We burst into the clearing, our screams tearing through the night. My grandma and my other cousins were already on their feet, their faces pale, eyes wide with confusion and fear. I stumbled, my legs giving out beneath me, and then everything went black. The next thing I remember was waking up in my bed, the events of the night before feeling like a horrible dream. But the fear in my cousin's eyes told me otherwise. Something was out there, something that wasn't human. And it wasn't finished with us yet. The morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, beaming soft patterns on the walls. I blinked, the events of the previous night swirling in my mind like a bad dream. I sat up slowly, my head still foggy, and looked around. The basement was quiet, my cousins still asleep in their beds. But it didn't feel right. There was an unease that clung to the air, a heaviness that made my skin prickle. I pushed the covers off and swung my legs over the side of the bed, my bare feet touching the cool concrete floor. I could hear the muffled sounds of my cousins outside, and I turned to look through the large sliding glass door. My bed was right against it, giving me a clear view of the backyard. My cousins were out there, standing in a tight group, their faces turned away from me. I frowned, something about their posture making my stomach twist. I pulled on a jacket, skipping breakfast as I made my way outside. The chill of the morning air hit me, and I rubbed my arms as I walked down the slight incline toward my cousins. They hadn't moved, their eyes fixed on something on the ground. As I got closer, the metallic scent of blood hit me, sharp and unmistakable. My heart dropped. My grandma's 2 dogs lay in the grass, their bodies still and broken. The sight stopped me in my tracks. Their fur was matted with blood, their bodies torn in ways that made my stomach churn. I heard a gasp. Maybe it was me, maybe it was one of my cousins, but the sound seemed to echo in the silence. I felt Danny step closer to me, his hand brushing against mine, his eyes wide with shock. What happened?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. No one answered. My grandma came out of the house then, her face pale as she hurried over. She took one look at the scene and pulled us all back, her voice trembling as she told us to go inside. She didn't want us to see anymore, but it was too late. The image was already seared into my mind. The rest of the day passed in a blur. The house felt different, like a shadow had settled over it, darkening every corner. My grandma tried to reassure us, her voice calm, but I could see the fear in her eyes too. She kept us close, not letting us wander far, her eyes constantly flicking to the windows, as if she expected to see something out there. That night we went to bed early. No one said much. The silence was heavy, the unease from the morning still lingering. I lay in my bed staring at the ceiling, the image of the dogs flashing in my mind every time I closed my eyes. Sleep didn't come easy, every creak of the house making my heart jump, every shift of the wind outside sounding like something moving through the yard. Sometime in the early hours of the morning, I finally drifted off, exhaustion pulling me under. But it didn't last. I woke suddenly, my eyes snapping open, my heart pounding. Something had hit my head. Something light, almost like a pebble. I blinked, disoriented, the room bathed in shadows. It took me a moment to realize my cousins were awake too, sitting together on the double bed across the room. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide, staring at me. Danny caught my gaze and nodded toward the sliding glass door. My stomach dropped, my body going cold. Slowly, I turned my head. Pressed against the glass was a face. Pale, twisted, its eyes wide and unblinking. The same face from the woods. Its mouth was stretched into a grotesque grin, its yellowed teeth bared. My breath caught in my throat, and for a long moment neither of us moved. Then it raised a hand, those same twisted, elongated fingers, and tapped on the glass, a deliberate rhythmic sound that seemed to echo through the room. I screamed, the sound tearing through the silence, filled with pure terror. The face vanished, disappearing into the darkness. My grandma rushed downstairs, her face etched with panic as I tried to explain, my words tumbling out in a frantic mess. She called the police, her hands trembling as she dialed. They searched the property, but they found nothing. No footprints, no signs that anyone had been there. It was as if the creature had simply vanished. The next morning, I packed my things. I couldn't stay there another night, not with the image of that face burned into my memory. I left, my heart heavy with fear and confusion. To this day, I haven't been back after dark. Even now, years later, I still have nightmares about that creature. Its hollow eyes, its twisted grin, the way it watched me through the glass. Whatever it wasn't human, and it wasn't finished with us. Sleep had finally come, but it never stayed for long. I woke up to the familiar feeling of unease, the kind that clung to the back of my neck like cold fingers. The room was dark, and the only sound was the slow breathing of my cousins across the room. I lay there trying to let the weight of exhaustion drag me under again, but something kept me alert, eyes open, senses on edge. A heaviness hung in the air, as if the very room was waiting for something to happen. And then it did. A muffled noise, like a shuffle, echoed from somewhere outside. My heart began to pound, the adrenaline sparking in my veins. I turned my head toward the sliding glass door, squinting into the darkness beyond. There was nothing there, only the reflection of my face, pale and frightened, staring back at me. But that heaviness, that sense of being watched, only grew stronger. It was like an itch I couldn't scratch, a warning that something was just out of sight. I blinked, and that's when I saw it. A shadow moved across the glass, slow, deliberate. My breath caught in my throat, the world shrinking down to just that one small pane of glass. The shadow stopped, and then, as if it sensed me watching, it turned. A face appeared, pressed against the glass, the same face from the woods. Those hollow glowing eyes stared at me, the twisted grin stretching across its face like it was mocking me, daring me to do something. My body locked up, every muscle, every nerve froze in place, and all I could do was stare back. The creature's eyes bore into me, and I knew it remembered me. I could feel its hatred, its hunger. It raised a hand, the fingers long and gnarled, and tapped against the glass. The sound was soft but deliberate, like it was calling me out, like it was reminding me it knew where I was. And then, Danny moved. He let out a sharp breath, a small whimper that sliced through the silence. The creature's eyes flicked toward the sound, and for a split second, I could see something shift in its expression, recognition, maybe satisfaction. And then it was gone, disappearing into the shadows without a sound. I didn't scream this time. I was too scared, the terror so deep it felt like I couldn't even breathe. My grandma rushed downstairs, her face filled with fear and confusion. My cousins were crying, their small bodies trembling as they clung to each other. I tried to explain, tried to make sense of it all, but the words wouldn't come. All I could do was point at the glass, at the place where the creature had been. The police came again, their lights flashing, their voices low and serious. They searched the woods, the yard, but again, they found nothing. No prints, no sign that anyone had been there. It was as if the creature was nothing but a figment of my imagination. But I knew better. I knew it was real, and I knew it wasn't finished with us. The next morning, I left. I packed my things, hugged my grandma, and promised I would come back, though I wasn't sure if I meant it. I couldn't stay there, not with that face still staring at me every time I closed my eyes. My cousins were silent as I left, their eyes filled with the same fear that gripped my heart. Even now, all these years later, I can't forget it. That twisted grin, those hollow eyes, they haunt my dreams. Whatever it wasn't human. And it knew me, it knew where I was, and it wanted me to be afraid. And the worst part, it worked. My father told me a story once, and I'll never forget it for a few reasons. I think it's the first story he ever told me as a child. It's also the story of how my grandfather died. But honestly, that isn't the reason I remember it so well. You hear stories on TV, or sometimes you overhear something in a public place. People talk about ghosts or aliens, and you think to yourself, that isn't real, they're making it up, or they're mistaken, or they're crazy, or something like that. You just can't believe it until something happens. Something that brings it all together, connects the dots in a way you didn't think of before. Maybe it happens to you, maybe you hear it, or maybe you hear the same story again and again happening to different people. It doesn't take long for the world to become a lot bigger than you thought it was. As I said, this is a story my father told me, but I never believed it, even though he swore up and down it was true. It wasn't until I started clicking around the internet that I started to believe. I started to hear other stories just like the one my father told me. It didn't take me long to believe in the rake. That's not what my father called it, of course. He's never used the internet in his life. He wouldn't know what the consensus has taken to naming it. When he chose to call it something other than it, or that thing, he called it a skinwalker, after an old Cherokee tale his grandfather told him. But I'll tell you the story the way he told it to me. We were out hunting one night. He had told me we were hunting coyotes. We'd kill them for $50 a skin. They lived near a dairy farm in Ohio, and they'd kill calves sometimes. We did it every night because we needed the money. Sometimes while we were out, we'd come across a deer and kill it. Our landlord didn't mind, and it could feed our family for a few nights and save us some money. Anyway, we were done making our rounds and began heading home, walking because we didn't have a car or a four-wheeler back then. We'd cut through the woods. That's when we came upon it. Blood everywhere, splattered on the trees, the grass, in the creek, everywhere. At first, we figured it was a pack of coyotes. We'd seen it sometimes. They can't scavenge and start hunting a deer or cattle. The worst was when they bred with feral dogs. But this wasn't like that. See, when a pack of dogs, wolves, or coyotes attacks something, they do it right. They pick off the one that's weak, sick, old, or just small. They hunt it, draw it into a corner, someplace it can't get out of, and they'll run it right into the biggest one, the alpha. And that deer will never see the alpha. It might hear it, but it won't see it. It'll just notice that its throat's gone, and then it'll drop dead. It's quick and clean. That wasn't what happened here. Something had run up on a den of deer. Coyotes won't attack a den, wolves neither, because they'd get too much of a fight. There were three bodies, just torn apart. You'd see a head there, a leg there, a torso here. Predators don't do that. They don't leave behind scraps. What had done this hadn't done it for food, it had done it for fun. But we didn't know that. We saw a bunch of carcasses, and we thought it was something we had to take care of. I remember my dad telling me to go home. He thought it was a pack of feral dogs, but I wasn't leaving him. And I damn sure wasn't walking through 2 miles of woods alone with nothing but a .22 and a pocket knife. I was 13 at the time, so a .22 rifle was the only gun I could reliably use. Dad had a shotgun, and I wasn't going anywhere without it. It took me a while to convince him, but finally, we began tracking whatever did that. It wasn't hard either. We just followed the blood. Either that thing bled before it got away, or it dragged one for a mile. I don't know. I know I'd never seen my dad scared before that night. We started hearing noises. I've been in a lot of woods in my life. I've been all over the world. And I haven't ever heard noises like I heard that night. I heard things screaming. I heard deer, a fox, rabbits, a raccoon, and birds, just scared. Keep in mind this was maybe midnight, or 1 a.m. Except for the fox and some birds, nothing was supposed to be awake. But they weren't just awake, they were moving. I saw flocks of birds just trying to get out of there. We came upon a pack of coyotes and nearly shot a couple of them, thinking it was what we were looking for. But then we saw they were running towards us, then right past us. They didn't even notice us. Then some deer did the same. Then some rabbits, squirrels, foxes, and even a couple of wild hogs. These things were supposed to be eating each other, and the only thing they cared about was getting out of there. We should have put it together, that maybe whatever we were tracking wasn't something we were supposed to see, and wasn't something we could kill. I don't know why we didn't just go home. I guess we were curious. I think that was my dad's nature, to go toward trouble, to fight. And knowing what I knew about what my father did during the war, my nature was to stay close to him. We finally got into an open valley. It was normally a soy field, but it wasn't in season, so it was just flat dirt. We saw the tracks. A lot of the animals fleeing the forest had paved over the land, but where that deer blood was, nothing had taken a single step, like they were leaving it for us to find. The tracks were shallow. Whatever it was couldn't have weighed more than 100 pounds. But that didn't mean much. A bobcat weighing 40 pounds nearly tore out my dad's throat once. All that means is it's quick and hard to hit. So we followed the tracks, and it didn't take us long to find where it was. There was this old schoolhouse that sat on the top of the hill. Half of it had been ripped out by a tornado, but nobody lived there. Not for a long time. We caught homeless people in there sometimes. Or even druggies looking for a safe place to shoot up. We figured maybe that was it. Maybe it was some sick kid riding a high. But we didn't think that for long. We got within 50 yards and heard this noise. A scratching kind of sound. It was sort of made up of two different sounds. One was a high-pitched screech, and the other was a low-pitched growl. It was making both at the same time. We got within 20 yards, and we heard the sound. I can remember thinking it sounded like paper being torn apart while someone was swishing water in a bucket back and forth. My dad looked at me, kneeled down, and whispered that I had to stay behind him because we were about to corner it. Any animal will fight when it's cornered, especially if it's a predator. But we could tell by the tracks that it was just one. He told me it was probably a single feral dog, most likely rabid. The plan was to sneak up on it while it was eating, shoot it, and then keep shooting it until it didn't move anymore. Then slit its throat. And if it got to Dad, it was my job to shoot it, or stab it to get it off of him. So he walked up, and I was right behind him, just a tad to his side so I could see what it was. I wish to this day that I hadn't. It was leaning over a carcass, tearing off its flesh, and throwing what it didn't nibble aside. There was blood all over the brick, glistening in the moonlight. It was pale white, human-looking but not quite human. It had arms and legs like a human, but it sat like a monkey, hunched over, and its hands weren't normal. It had long fingers with claws at the end. So we saw that, and my dad hesitated. He wasn't about to fire on a person, so he cleared his throat, trying to get it to turn around. I swear to God, all the noise just ceased. I haven't ever heard true silence before that, and not after it. But for a few seconds, nothing. Nothing made any noise, which made it all the louder when it turned around, made this shrill cry and jumped on my dad. He got a shot off. I think he missed. If he hit the thing, it didn't mind, but it was on him, tearing parts of him off. I started shooting with my .22 point blank, but it barely bled. I got off 5 rounds, and then I started hitting it with the butt of the gun. It wasn't budging. It didn't even register that I was there. It was clawing at my dad, taking off bits of his flesh, and started on his torso, ripping off skin. Then it moved up. It tore off his throat and then his nose, ripped off the bottom half of his jaw. I don't exactly remember what happened, but somehow my dad's knife ended up in the thing's shoulder, and my dad ended up on my back. I'm running, and by God, I'm running faster than I have ever run before, and it's following me. I ended up back in the woods, opposite the ones we'd been in. I'm heading towards my landlord's house because it's half a mile away. I can hear the thing screeching and moaning. I hear these tree branches crack and get thrown around. It sounds like someone's taking an axe to every single tree I pass. It's cracking so loud and often, but I just can't look back. Finally, I trip into gravel. I look up, and there's my landlord, and a bunch of his buddies drinking around a campfire. I scream, and I cry, and they come over. I'm telling them to call an ambulance, and he looks at me, and I'll never forget what he said. "What's on your back?" he asked me. Just as he said it, he saw one of those god-awful flannel shirts my dad wore everywhere. It was what was left of my dad. Suddenly, we heard it screeching. He grabbed me, and my dad got thrown to the ground. I'm fighting him, crying because I think we can still save him somehow, but my dad had been gone before I ever picked him up. He had to pick me up and throw me aside before I came with him. He and his buddies were all inside, locking their doors and getting guns. The landlord was asking me what happened, but I just didn't know what to tell him. He pieced enough of it all together to understand that there was something dangerous there. All the lights in the house were on, and someone called the cops. They'd be there in 15 minutes. We looked outside, and I saw it walk in front of the fire they'd made. They didn't know what it was. One of them said it looked like an ape. Suddenly, something came through the window. We shot at it, but it wasn't the thing. It was my landlord's dog, just the body though, not its head or legs. We started pushing things in front of the doors and windows when we heard something in the garage. I remember one of my friends saying the doors were open. We heard metal and glass get ripped apart, but we put a couch and TV in front of the door to the garage. It banged around some more, but then it got quiet. Not silent like it was before. We could hear it move around some. And the guys were talking, making sure the guns were ready. Someone handed me a pistol. No sooner had I cocked the hammer back did we hear something shatter upstairs. Then we heard it screech again, except now it was louder. And it didn't echo and fade out because it was inside. We all rushed to the one door leading upstairs, and we got to it just as that thing did. It opened it just a bit, and 4 or 5 men just slammed into it. It got its hand through though. Someone with a shotgun took care of that, put the barrel right up to its wrist, and pulled the trigger, tried to cut its hand clean off. That only pissed it off though. It started pushing on the door, clawing. We were on one side, pushing as best as we could, and it was on the other side, doing the same. The wood was just not going to hold. Someone told us to keep our heads down. Then suddenly, the top half of the door was just gone. My ears were ringing, and there were splinters everywhere. 2 or 3 of them unloaded on the top of the door. I don't really know where it went after that. The police got there. I was still glued to the door, or what was left of it. The sun was up before they got me off of it. They put me in the hospital for a while. A lot of people talked to me, but I didn't talk back, not for a long time. When I got back home, I got a job for the landlord working on the farm. We didn't talk much, not about the thing. But I signed up for the army when I was 19, and he'd sat me down to drink some scotch as a send-off. I asked him right away what the police told him. The story they went with was a wild animal, probably a wolf or maybe a bear that had migrated north. I asked him how they could say that when they had the hand. He looked at me, stunned. He told me the hand never made it back to the station. The cop who had it in his car wrecked into a tree and died on impact. The hand was never found, probably taken away by an animal. The cops, when they would acknowledge the hand existed at all, said it was simply the paw of a bear, and it looked like a human hand. I never talked to the landlord again. He went missing when I was in basic training. They never found him. They say he owed some people money and just ran away, but I don't think it's that simple. I never went back to those woods. I wouldn't, even if I had the whole US Army at my back. I don't think my father felt he had anything left, and that he might as well settle old scores. He went into those woods. He never came back. The FBI was called. They did a show for everyone involved, but I knew they weren't really looking. I had to get one drunk and slip him a few 50s before he finally told me that they got a few calls about those woods every year. About someone up and vanishing. But that was all he wanted to tell me before he got up and left with the rest of the team. He wrote the rake onto a napkin. I didn't know what it meant until I searched for it on the internet. Honestly, I would have rather not known. It was late July in 2004, and my 10-year-old son and I were moving to our new home near Gallup, New Mexico. After a long day of packing and cleaning, we were both exhausted. Despite my fatigue, my son was excited, buzzing with the kind of energy only a child could muster at the end of such a long day. As we closed the door to our old apartment for the last time, I felt a mix of exhaustion and hope. The air outside was heavy, and the night was strangely quiet, as if the world had paused, holding its breath. A strange sense of unease settled in the pit of my stomach. I tried to ignore the feeling as we walked toward the car. The parking lot was dark, illuminated only by the dim streetlights. My son was just a step ahead of me, and I was about to tell him to wait when I felt it, a tingle at the back of my neck. I stopped, my eyes scanning the darkness around us. I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. That's when I saw it. A shadow moved quickly from behind my neighbor's car to the tree that stood between our apartments. I froze, my heart pounding. I couldn't make out much, but I knew it wasn't normal. My breath caught in my throat, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. The creature moved just enough into the light for me to catch a glimpse of it. It wasn't like the monsters from stories. There were no glowing eyes or sharp teeth. But that almost made it worse. It looked real. Too real. The creature had shaggy, matted fur, brown and unkempt. It stood on 2 legs, hunched over awkwardly, and it was much larger than any wolf I'd ever seen. My instincts screamed at me to look away, but I couldn't. I was frozen, barely able to breathe, my gaze locked on the creature as it tried to blend into the shadows behind the tree, as if it realized it had made a mistake by being seen. Slowly, I reached for my son's hand. He turned to me, confusion written on his face. "Mom?" he asked. But I shook my head, not wanting to scare him. I whispered for him to keep moving, trying to sound calm, though my voice trembled. My heart raced, and my hands shook as I fumbled with the keys. We made it to the car, and I quickly unlocked it, glancing back at the tree. The creature was no longer visible, but I knew it was still there, fighting. My son climbed into the car, still oblivious to what I had seen. I got in, locking the doors behind me. As I started the engine, I looked at him, relief washing over me. "Did you see that?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He shook his head, his eyes wide, not with fear but with confusion. Thank goodness. I drove away, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. In the rearview mirror, I half expected to see the creature step out from behind the tree, but the street was empty. Still, the sense of dread lingered. Even as we left that place behind, I knew what I had seen. I knew it was real, and I prayed that I would never see it again. That night, after we arrived at our new home, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, replaying every detail in my mind. The creature, its hunched form, the way it tried to hide in the shadows. A chill settled over me that wouldn't fade, no matter how tightly I wrapped myself in my blanket. Every sound seemed louder. Every creak of the house made my heart pound. I knew it was just the wind, just the settling of a new house, but I couldn't shake the fear. I got up and went to the kitchen, hoping a glass of water might calm me. The house felt too quiet, the silence pressing in on me. I looked out the window, my eyes scanning the darkness, half expecting to see the creature standing there watching. But there was nothing, only shadows. I took a deep breath, trying to convince myself we were safe now, that whatever I had seen was far behind us. The next day, I decided to tell my brother-in-law about what I had seen. He was the kind of person who knew about strange things, the stories people whispered but never really believed. As I spoke, he listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with every detail. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "It was a skinwalker," he said, his voice low. "They don't let themselves be seen unless they want to be." His words sent a fresh wave of fear through me. The thought that the creature had wanted me to see it, even for just a moment, made my skin crawl. I tried to shake it off, to tell myself it was over, but the feeling stayed. It was like a shadow that wouldn't leave, a constant reminder that there were things out there I couldn't understand. Days passed, but the memory of that night refused to fade. I would catch myself glancing out the window, my eyes searching the tree line, always looking for something that shouldn't be there. At night, when the wind howled outside, I would close my eyes and remember the way the creature moved, the way it seemed to melt into the darkness. I told myself it was just my imagination, but I couldn't help it. The fear had settled deep inside me, and I didn't know if it would ever go away. One night as I lay in bed, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. I closed my eyes, trying to block out the sound, but it was no use. The feeling of dread came rushing back, and suddenly, I was right there again, in the parking lot, the creature just feet away, its eyes hidden in the shadows. I knew deep down that it was still out there. Maybe not near us, maybe not watching, but it was out there, somewhere. And that was enough to keep me awake, my heart pounding, praying I would never see it again. I pulled my truck into the clearing, gravel crunching under the tires like the sound of a campfire. The fire tower loomed above the trees, a skeletal structure that seemed both out of place and yet perfectly suited for this isolated patch of wilderness. I killed the engine and sat there for a moment, taking in the silence that only nature can offer. It was a silence that spoke volumes, filled with the whispers of the wind through the pines and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures waking to their dark world. I grabbed my gear and locked the truck. As I approached the base of the tower, I noticed a small, weather-beaten shed nearby. The door creaked open and out stepped Jim, the ranger I was relieving. He was a grizzled man, his face etched with lines that told stories of years spent under the sun and against the wind. "Evening," he greeted, extending a hand roughened by years of labor. "You must be the new guy." "That's me," I said, shaking his hand. "First night on the tower." Jim's eyes narrowed slightly, as if measuring me up, weighing my mettle. "Well, it's not a job for everyone. Gets lonely up there, and quiet, too quiet sometimes." "I think I can handle it," I replied, a hint of youthful arrogance coloring my words. Jim chuckled, a low, rumbling sound like distant thunder. "We'll see. Here," he said, handing me a small, tattered manual. "Read this. It's got some rules you'll need to follow." I glanced at the manual. It looked like something from a bygone era, its pages yellowed and corners dog-eared. "Rules?" "Yeah," Jim said, his voice dropping a notch. "Important ones. Don't ignore 'em." I flipped open the manual and skimmed through the list. "Do not leave the tower. Turn off all lights between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. Do not answer the radio during this hour." The rules read like a cross between standard operating procedures and superstitious folklore. "Are these for real?" I asked, skepticism lacing my voice. Jim locked eyes with me, and for a moment I saw something there. A flicker of earnestness, a shadow of concern. "Deadly real," he said. "You'd do well to remember them." I nodded, not fully convinced but not willing to dismiss him outright. "All right, I'll keep them in mind." "Good," Jim said, clapping me on the back. "You got the radio if you need anything, but remember, no calls between 2 and 3. That's your time to be vigilant." With that cryptic advice, Jim headed toward his truck, leaving me standing there with the manual in hand. I watched him drive off, his taillights disappearing into the darkening forest, and then turned my attention to the tower. Taking a deep breath, I began my ascent, each step echoing with a metallic clang that shattered the natural silence. When I reached the top, I unlocked the hatch and stepped into the cabin. It was a small, utilitarian space equipped with the basics: radio, binoculars, a first aid kit, and a bed. I set my gear down and took a seat, flipping on the radio and adjusting the binoculars. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with hues of orange and purple, I felt a sense of isolation envelop me, as if the tower were an island in a sea of darkness. And so, my vigil began. I had no idea then how crucial those strange rules would become, how they would test the very limits of my sanity and courage. But for now, I was alone, perched high above the world, a guardian in a tower of secrets and silence. And I was ready, or so I thought. The night settled in like a heavy blanket, the kind that smothers you in its weight. I leaned back in the chair, my eyes scanning the dark expanse of forest through the binoculars. The radio buzzed with occasional chatter, mostly mundane updates from other rangers or weather reports. I had the manual open beside me, its list of rules a curious distraction. I chuckled to myself. "Too quiet sometimes," Jim had said. Well, quiet was part of the job description, wasn't it? It was around midnight when the first oddity occurred. A soft glow appeared in the distance, like a campfire that had learned to float. It hovered over the trees, casting an eerie luminescence that seemed to pulse. I squinted, trying to make sense of it. Then I remembered Rule 4. Do not look at any glowing lights in the forest. I quickly averted my gaze, a chill running down my spine. What kind of place was this? I shook off the unease, attributing it to first night jitters. I reached for the radio, intending to check in, when a static-laden voice broke through. "Ranger Tower 6, do you copy?" The voice was distorted, almost robotic. I picked up the radio. "This is Tower 6, go ahead." The voice crackled again. "All clear. Over." Something about the transmission didn't sit right with me. It was too emotionless. I glanced at the manual again, half expecting to find a rule about not trusting the radio. There wasn't one. But Rule 3 did say not to answer the radio between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. I checked the clock. It was only midnight, but the rule suddenly seemed less arbitrary. I decided to step outside onto the platform for some fresh air, thinking it might clear my head. The wind had picked up, rustling the leaves and carrying with it the earthy scent of the forest. I leaned against the railing, looking out into the darkness. That's when I heard it, a low growl, coming from the trees below. It was a guttural sound, filled with menace and intent. My hand instinctively went to the flare gun hanging by the door. Rule 5. If you hear an animal in distress, do not go outside. Instead, fire a flare. But this didn't sound like an animal in distress. This sounded like a predator, one that knew exactly what it was doing. I stood there, my senses heightened, every nerve tingling with anticipation. The growl came again, closer this time, followed by the snap of twigs and the rustle of underbrush. Something was moving down there, something big. I backed into the cabin and locked the door, my eyes darting to the manual. I had scoffed at the rules earlier, dismissing them as the ramblings of superstitious minds. But now, alone in this tower, surrounded by an impenetrable darkness that seemed to close in with each passing minute, I felt a creeping realization. The rules were there for a reason, and as the clock ticked closer to the forbidden hour, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was about to find out why. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder as the minutes crawled by, each second stretching into an eternity. I had returned to my seat, my eyes now darting between the binoculars and the manual. The radio sat silent, as if holding its breath along with me. I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest was watching, waiting for me to make a mistake. It was then that I heard it, a high-pitched wail echoing through the trees like a siren's call. The sound was gut-wrenching, filled with agony and despair. My first instinct was to grab my flashlight and head out, but then I remembered Rule 5. If you hear an animal in distress, do not go outside. Instead, fire a flare. I hesitated, my hand hovering over the door handle. The wail came again, more desperate this time, as if pleading for help. My heart pounded in my chest, every fiber of my being screaming to go out there and do something. But the rules, those damn rules, they were etched into my mind now, each one a warning, a boundary not to be crossed. With a sense of resignation, I reached for the flare gun. I loaded it, stepped onto the platform, and aimed it skyward. As I pulled the trigger, the flare shot up into the night, its red light painting the sky like a brushstroke of fire. For a moment, the forest was bathed in a crimson glow, and I held my breath, waiting for whatever would come next. What happened then was beyond explanation. Another light appeared in the sky, mimicking the flare's trajectory. It hovered for a moment before descending into the forest, its glow extinguishing as suddenly as it had appeared. I stood there stunned, my mind struggling to process what I had just witnessed. It was as if the forest had responded, had mimicked my action in a grotesque display of mockery. I retreated into the cabin, my hands trembling as I locked the door behind me. I sank into the chair, my eyes fixed on the manual. Rule 5 had saved me from stepping outside. But what had I just invited in? What kind of place was capable of such unnatural phenomena? I picked up the radio, my fingers hovering over the dial. I wanted to call for help, to hear another human voice, to be told that everything was going to be all right. But then I remembered Rule 3. Do not answer the radio between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. I glanced at the clock. It was 1:45 a.m. The forbidden hour was approaching and I was running out of time. As I sat there, contemplating my next move, I realized that the rules were more than just guidelines. They were lifelines, each one a key to survival in a place that defied logic and reason. And as the clock ticked closer to 2 a.m., I couldn't help but wonder what other horrors awaited me, what other rules I would be forced to follow. But for now, all I could do was wait, my eyes fixed on the clock, my mind racing with thoughts and fears. And so I braced myself for the hour that was to come, the hour that the manual had ominously referred to as your time to be vigilant. And God help me, I was. The clock struck 2 a.m., its chimes echoing in the small cabin like a funeral dirge. I reached for the light switch and hesitated, my fingers trembling. Rule 2. Turn off all lights between 2 a.m. and 3 a.m. I took a deep breath and flicked the switch, plunging the room into darkness. My eyes strained to adjust, but it was a darkness so complete, it felt like being swallowed by a black hole. I sat there, my back against the wall, my senses heightened to a razor's edge. The radio sat silent on the table, its mute form a grim reminder of Rule 3. Do not answer the radio during this hour. I glanced at the manual, its pages now invisible in the dark, but its rules etched into my memory like commandments on stone tablets. The wind howled outside, its mournful cries weaving through the trees like the wails of lost souls. I strained my ears, listening for any sound that might break the oppressive silence. And then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate footsteps crunching on the gravel below the tower. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat a drum roll of dread. I thought of reaching for the flare gun, but what good would it do in this darkness? And who, or what, was I up against? My mind raced through the possibilities, each more terrifying than the last. Was it a person, defying the rules for some nefarious purpose? Or was it something else, something that called this dark forest its home? The footsteps grew louder, ascending the metal stairs with a rhythmic clang that sent shivers down my spine. I held my breath, my eyes darting to the door, half expecting it to burst open at any moment. But it didn't. The footsteps reached the top of the stairs and then... silence. A silence so complete it felt like the world had stopped breathing. Minutes ticked by, each one an eternity of anticipation and fear. I dared not move, dared not make a sound, as if my very breath could shatter this fragile moment. And then, as suddenly as it had started, the silence was broken. A scratching sound, like nails on a chalkboard, reverberated through the room. It was coming from the door, from just outside the door. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms, my body taut like a bowstring. The scratching continued, each stroke a violation, an intrusion into this sanctuary I had thought impregnable. And then, just as suddenly, it stopped. The room fell silent again, the tension lifting like a fog, leaving in its wake a sense of relief so profound. It felt like a physical weight being lifted off my shoulders. I glanced at the clock. It was 3 a.m. The forbidden hour had passed. With a sense of disbelief, I reached for the light switch and flicked it on. The room was bathed in light, its familiar contours a stark contrast to the darkness that had enveloped it just moments ago. I was alone, but the sense of isolation had been replaced by something else. A realization that I was not alone in this forest. That I was a guest in a world governed by rules I could neither understand nor ignore. And as I sat there, my eyes fixed on the manual, I couldn't help but wonder what the next rule would bring, what the next hour would hold. But for now, all I could do was wait. And listen. And hope that whatever had visited me during that forbidden hour would not return. But deep down, I knew it was only a matter of time. The clock read 3:15 a.m., and the cabin was once again a sanctuary of light and normalcy, or as normal as it could be, given the night's events. I had just begun to entertain the notion that the worst was behind me when the radio crackled to life. "Ranger Tower 6, do you copy?" The voice was clear, human, and filled with a sense of urgency that sent a jolt through my spine. I picked up the radio, my hand still trembling from the adrenaline of the past hour. "This is Tower 6, go ahead." "Thank God," the voice exhaled. "I'm Ranger Mike Thompson. I've been trying to reach you. I need to come up. Can you unlock the door?" My fingers hovered over the lock, ready to comply, when a flicker of doubt crossed my mind. Rule 6. If someone claims to be a ranger and asks to be let in, ask for their full name and badge number. "Can you confirm your badge number, Mike?" I asked, my voice tinged with caution. There was a pause, a momentary lapse that filled the airwaves with static and uncertainty. "Badge number 4579, he finally replied. I was about to unlock the door when another transmission broke through, this one weak and filled with static. "Don't let in," the voice sputtered, barely audible over the crackling airwaves. My heart sank. The voice was distorted, but the message was clear. I pulled my hand away from the lock, my body frozen in a state of indecision. "Who is this?" I demanded, my voice rising in pitch. No answer came, but what followed was worse. A gut-wrenching scream that tore through the radio, filling the cabin with its echo of pure terror. Then, silence. I sat there, the radio now a heavy weight in my hands, my mind racing with questions and fears. Had I just heard a man die? And what had he been trying to warn me about? I backed away from the door, my eyes fixed on its sturdy frame as if expecting it to betray me. I thought of the scratching sounds from earlier, the footsteps on the stairs, the rules that had become my lifelines in this night of unimaginable horror. And I realized, with a sense of dread, that the rules had not been written to protect me from the forest. They had been written to protect me from what lived within it. I sank to the floor, my body trembling, my mind a whirlpool of thoughts and emotions. I had been so close to letting whatever it was into this sanctuary, so close to breaking the one rule that might have cost me my life. As I sat there, my eyes fixed on the clock, I knew that the night was far from over, that the rules would be tested again, that my sanity and courage would be pushed to their very limits. But for now, all I could do was wait, my eyes darting between the door and the radio, my ears straining for any sound that might pierce the silence. And so, I waited, my body curled into a ball on the floor, my mind a fortress preparing for the next siege. And God help me, it came. The first rays of dawn filtered through the windows, casting long shadows across the cabin. I had survived the night, but at what cost? My body felt like a wrung-out rag, my mind a labyrinth of questions with no answers. I glanced at the clock, 6:30 a.m. The night was over, but its echoes still reverberated through my soul. I heard the distant rumble of engines, and looked out to see a convoy of vehicles approaching. Emergency medical technicians, park rangers, and what looked like a couple of unmarked SUVs. They pulled up to the base of the tower, and people began to spill out, their movements hurried, their faces etched with concern and curiosity. I unlocked the door and began my descent, each step a reminder of the night's terrors. As I reached the ground, a pair of EMTs rushed over, their eyes scanning me for injuries. "Are you okay?" one of them asked, her voice tinged with professional concern. "I'm not sure," I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. They led me to an ambulance where they checked my vitals and shone a light into my eyes. "You're in shock," the EMT said, "but otherwise you seem okay." "Okay?" I thought. "I'm far from okay." A park ranger approached, his face stern, his eyes searching. "We're going to need a statement," he said. I looked at him, my mind wrestling with the decision. Could I tell them what had happened? Would they even believe me? And what about the rules, the manual that had become my Bible in that God-forsaken tower? "I can't explain," I finally said, my voice tinged with defeat. The ranger stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, you're free to go, but we'll need to talk eventually." I nodded and walked away, my eyes catching sight of a group of rangers examining the base of the tower. They were collecting something, shell casings, spots of blood, evidence of a night that defied explanation. I climbed into my truck and started the engine, my hands gripping the wheel as if it were a lifeline. As I drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw the tower receding in the distance, its skeletal frame now a monument to a night I would never forget. And then I saw it. A deer, standing at the edge of the clearing, its eyes meeting mine in a moment of shared recognition. As I passed, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The deer had a shred of a ranger's patch impaled on one of its antlers, and its nose and mouth were stained with what looked like blood. I pressed the accelerator and didn't look back, my eyes fixed on the road ahead, my mind a whirlpool of thoughts and fears. I had survived the night, but the questions remained, each one a haunting reminder of a world that existed beyond the boundaries of reason and logic. And as I drove away, leaving behind a tower of secrets and a forest of nightmares, I knew that some questions were better left unanswered, some rules better left unbroken, and some places better left unvisited. The city lights appeared on the horizon like a distant galaxy, a stark contrast to the inky darkness of the forest I had left behind. My truck ate up the miles, but my mind was still trapped in that tower, in that night of unimaginable horror. I had made it out, but the scars were etched deep, not just on my soul, but on the very fabric of my understanding of the world. I had already made up my mind. I was quitting the ranger service. The city offered anonymity, a refuge of concrete and steel where the rules of nature didn't include cryptic manuals and unspoken horrors. I could find a job, maybe go back to school. Anything to escape the memories, the questions, the rules. As I pulled into my driveway, the weight of the past hours seemed to lift slightly. Home, safety, normalcy. I killed the engine and sat there for a moment, gathering the strength to step out, to cross the threshold into my old life. That's when I saw it, the manual lying on the passenger seat, its pages now dog-eared and stained with the sweat and fear of the night. Rule 6 flashed through my mind. If someone claims to be a ranger and asks to be let in, ask for their full name and badge number. I grabbed the manual and stepped out of the truck, my eyes scanning the quiet suburban street, half expecting to see a figure lurking in the shadows, but there was nothing. I was alone. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, the familiarity of my home wrapping around me like a warm blanket. I tossed the manual onto the kitchen table and headed for the shower, desperate to wash away the grime and fear of the past hours. As the hot water cascaded over me, I felt my muscles relax, the tension draining away like water down the drain. And for a moment, just a moment, I allowed myself to believe that it was over, that I had escaped. That's when I heard it, a knock on the door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks that cut through the sound of the shower like a knife through flesh. My heart stopped, my blood turning to ice in my veins. I turned off the shower and stepped out, my eyes darting to the bathroom window. It was dark outside, the world shrouded in a cloak of night that seemed to stretch into eternity. I wrapped a towel around me and crept to the kitchen, my eyes falling on the manual, its presence now a mocking reminder of the world I had left behind, but that had not left me. Another knock, louder this time, more insistent. I approached the door, my body trembling, my mind screaming at me to run, to hide, to escape. But there was no escape, not from this. I looked through the peephole and saw a figure standing outside, its features obscured by the darkness. And then it spoke, its voice a chilling whisper that seeped through the door like a malevolent mist. "Ranger, let me in. It's safe now." My hand hovered over the lock, my breath caught in my throat, my soul teetering on the edge of an abyss, from which there was no return. And then I remembered the final unwritten rule, the one that now filled me with a terror beyond words, beyond comprehension. Some rules are meant to be broken, but some doors are meant to stay closed. Forever. The fire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows around our campsite as I watched the flames dance, mesmerized by their hypnotic rhythm. Marcus sat across from me, his face partially obscured by the firelight, a look of calm etched onto his features. We were miles deep in the Ozark National Forest, away from any trace of civilization. Marcus had always loved the wilderness, and I idolized him, always wanting to follow wherever he led. This trip was our last adventure together before he was to deploy, and I could think of no better way to spend it than beside my brother, deep in the wild. The air was cool and still under the starless sky. The only sounds were the gentle rustling of the leaves and the occasional pop of the campfire. Marcus told stories of his adventures overseas, his voice a mix of pride and melancholy, and I listened, captivated. But as the night went on, I felt an unnatural chill settle in, a chill that seemed to seep into my bones, gnawing at the edges of my nerves. I tried to brush it off, but then I heard it. A distant cry, echoing through the woods, unlike anything I had heard before. It wasn't the yowl of a coyote or the call of an owl. It was something else, a sound that sat somewhere between a human scream and the howl of an animal. I caught Marcus's eye, and for a fleeting moment, I saw it, the uncertainty in his gaze, the glimmer of worry he tried to hide. He gave me a reassuring smile. "It's probably just a bobcat," he said, his voice steady. "They can make some strange noises." I nodded, but the unease lingered. Something in the pit of my stomach told me we weren't alone. Later that night, I woke with a jolt. The fire had burned down to embers, casting a dim red glow around the camp. My heart pounded in my ears, and I had no idea why, until I heard it. Low guttural noises, like something trying to speak but failing, mixed with the unmistakable sound of something moving through the underbrush. I turned my head slightly, my eyes adjusting to the darkness, and saw Marcus, already awake, his eyes scanning the edge of our camp. He glanced at me, and his expression made my blood run cold. He brought a finger to his lips, signaling me to stay quiet, then gestured for me to put on my shoes. I moved as silently as I could, my hands shaking as I fumbled with my laces. The noises grew closer, twigs snapping, a whispering that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere all at once. My breath caught in my throat, and Marcus leaned close, his voice barely a whisper. "We need to move. Now." I nodded, fear gripping me, and Marcus helped me out of the tent. He motioned for me to climb onto his back, and without hesitation, I did. He moved quickly but quietly, his footsteps barely audible as we made our way up the hill, away from our campsite. The dark woods surrounded us, every shadow seeming to shift and move as we passed. My heart pounded harder with each step, and I clung to Marcus, trying to steady my breathing. We reached a cluster of dense bushes, and Marcus crouched down, setting me on the ground beside him. He drew his pistol, the metallic click of the slide sending a shiver down my back. We lay there in silence, hidden in the underbrush, watching the campsite from our elevated position. The minutes stretched on, each one feeling like an eternity. I could feel the damp earth beneath me, smell the scent of pine and decay, but all I could focus on was the darkness below. Then, I saw it, a figure emerging from the trees. It moved in a jerky, unnatural way, its limbs elongated, its body twisted. My breath caught in my throat as I watched it step closer to our campsite. The thing let out a low, gurgling noise, followed by a sound that made my blood run cold. It was my brother's voice, or at least something trying to mimic it. "Hello?" it called, the word twisted and broken, as if spoken through a shattered mirror. My entire body went rigid, fear unlike anything I'd ever felt coursing through me. Marcus tightened his grip on his pistol, his eyes locked on the creature. He leaned close to my ear, his voice barely a whisper. "Stay quiet," he said. "No matter what happens, stay quiet." I nodded, tears stinging my eyes as I watched the creature circle our tent, sniffing the air. My heart felt like it might burst out of my chest, and I pressed myself deeper into the ground, praying that whatever it was wouldn't find us. We stayed there, hidden in the darkness, as the creature moved through our camp. I had never felt so small, so powerless. Every second felt like an hour, the terror of the unknown pressing down on me, the realization that we were truly alone out here, miles from anyone who could help. I clung to Marcus, knowing that as long as he was there, I had a chance. And so, we waited, the darkness closing in, the forest around us alive with shadows. The darkness seemed to grow thicker around us as we lay hidden in the underbrush. My brother's steady breathing the only thing anchoring me to reality. Marcus held his pistol at the ready, his eyes scanning the campsite below, every muscle in his body tense. I tried to match his calm, but my heart was racing, my body trembling as I listened to the eerie silence around us. I felt like the forest was tense, waiting for something to happen. Time moved strangely as we hid there, the minutes dragging on like hours. My mind kept racing back to the creature I had seen, the way it moved, the way it sounded like Marcus but broken, twisted. My skin crawled just thinking about it. I had never seen anything like it before, and I knew that whatever it wasn't human. It was something else, something ancient and malevolent that didn't belong in this world. I glanced at Marcus, his expression locked in concentration. He gave me a small nod, as if to say, "We're okay." But I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his eyes never left the darkness. He was scared too, even if he would never admit it. I wanted to ask him what we should do, but I was too afraid to make a sound. The creature could be anywhere, watching us, waiting for us to slip up. Suddenly, a noise cut through the silence. Heavy footsteps, twigs snapping under the weight of something large. My breath caught in my throat, and I pressed myself closer to the ground, my eyes wide as I scanned the darkness below. There it was again, that grotesque figure emerging from the shadows, moving with that same unnatural jerking motion. My stomach twisted in fear, my whole body trembling. The creature was back, and it was searching for us. The thing let out a low growl, its head jerking from side to side as it sniffed the air, its long limbs twitching unnaturally. It moved closer to the remnants of our camp, circling the torn tent like a predator hunting its prey. It let out another sound, a distorted imitation of Marcus's voice. "Where are you?" it called. the words chilling and wrong. I clenched my teeth, trying not to let the fear overwhelm me, trying not to move or make a sound. Marcus slowly raised his pistol, his finger resting on the trigger. He was ready, but I knew he didn't want to fire unless he absolutely had to. The creature paused, its head tilting as if it had heard something. I held my breath, every muscle in my body frozen. It started moving again, closer to the hill where we were hiding. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might give us away. The creature's glowing eyes seemed to scan the woods, and I knew that if it saw us, we would be done for. Suddenly, a blinding light cut through the darkness, and the wail of a siren shattered the silence. The creature let out an ear-piercing scream, a sound that seemed to rattle the very trees around us. Marcus pulled me down, shielding me with his body as the creature bolted into the woods, its long limbs moving with impossible speed, disappearing into the darkness. The sirens grew louder, the flashing lights approaching through the trees, illuminating the forest with an otherworldly glow. I let out a shaky breath, my body sagging in relief as the creature vanished from sight. Marcus held me close, his eyes still scanning the forest, his grip on the pistol never loosening. The lights grew closer, and I could see the outline of a ranger's truck making its way through the woods. Marcus raised his hand, signaling our position, and within moments, the ranger's flashlight was on us. "You boys all right?" the ranger called out, his voice a mix of concern and urgency. Marcus nodded, helping me to my feet. I was shaking, my legs feeling like they could barely hold me up. The ranger approached, his eyes wide as he took in the sight of us. Two brothers, one of them armed, hiding in the underbrush in the middle of the night. "We're all right," Marcus said, his voice steady. "But we need to get out of here, now." The ranger led us back to his truck, his flashlight cutting through the darkness as we moved. I stayed close to Marcus, my heart still pounding. The memory of the creature's twisted form burned into my mind. As we climbed into the truck bed, I looked back at the forest, the darkness seeming to close in behind us. Whatever that thing was, it was still out there, lurking in the shadows, waiting. And I knew that I would never forget the terror of that night, the feeling of being hunted by something that shouldn't exist. Marcus gave me a reassuring squeeze on the shoulder, and I clung to that small comfort, knowing that as long as he was by my side, I had a chance. The truck rumbled as it bounced along the uneven dirt road, the ranger's lights flashing through the trees, casting brief glimpses of the forest rushing past us. I sat in the bed of the truck, huddled close to Marcus, the cool metal beneath me a strange comfort. I could still hear the creature's scream in my ears, that distorted echo that seemed to penetrate into my very bones. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to focus on the present, on Marcus's arm around me, on the steady rumble of the truck, on the knowledge that we were finally getting away. The ranger turned his head slightly, shouting back over the roar of the engine, "What was it you boys saw out there?" His voice carried a hint of disbelief, like he couldn't quite believe what he had stumbled upon. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. How could I describe it? How could I explain something that shouldn't exist? I looked to Marcus, hoping he'd know what to say. Marcus hesitated, his eyes flicking from me to the ranger. "Something dangerous," he finally said. "Not an animal, not anything I've seen before." He kept his words vague, but I could hear the edge in his voice. He was scared, and that made me even more uneasy. Marcus was never scared. The ranger nodded, his eyes narrowing as he focused back on the road ahead. "We'll get you two to safety. Don't worry." I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that we were safe now, but deep down, I knew that whatever that thing was, it wasn't gone. It was out there, somewhere, lurking in the shadows, waiting. The forest seemed to stretch on endlessly, the narrow dirt path winding through the darkness. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see those glowing eyes staring back at me. The cold wind whipped across my face, and I shivered, my entire body still tense. Marcus pulled me closer, his voice barely a whisper in my ear. "We're okay. We're gonna be okay." I nodded, but I couldn't shake the fear that clung to me. The ranger's truck eventually broke through the tree line, the dense forest giving way to a small clearing where a couple of other vehicles were parked, their lights illuminating the area. As we rolled to a stop, I let out a shaky breath, my eyes scanning the clearing. It felt surreal, like I had stepped back into reality, away from the nightmare of the dark woods. The ranger helped us out of the truck, his expression serious. "You boys did the right thing calling for help. There's something strange going on out here tonight." He gestured for us to follow him toward one of the other trucks, where a second ranger stood waiting. Marcus nodded, keeping me close as we walked. I could feel the other ranger's eyes on us, a mix of curiosity and concern. The rangers spoke in hushed tones, their expressions grim. I caught snippets of their conversation, words like, "search party," and "not alone." I swallowed hard, my gaze drifting back toward the dark line of trees. It felt like they were watching me, like the shadows were alive, and the unease in my stomach grew stronger. I turned back to Marcus, his face set in a determined expression. He looked down at me, giving me a small smile, though I could see the worry in his eyes. "We're going to be okay," he repeated, his voice firm. "I'm not leaving you, all right?" I nodded, clinging to his words, even though a part of me knew that the fear wouldn't leave me so easily. Not after what we had seen. The second ranger approached us, giving Marcus a nod. "We're going to take you boys back to the station. You'll be safe there for the night." He paused, looking between us. "But if you can, I need you to tell us exactly what happened out there." Marcus exchanged a glance with me, then looked back at the ranger. "We'll tell you what we can," he said, his voice steady. "But I don't know if you're going to believe us." The ranger gave a grim smile. "Son, out here, I've learned to believe in a lot of things." We climbed into the truck, and as we pulled away, I took one last look at the dark forest, its secrets hidden behind the wall of trees. The fear was still there, gnawing at me, but I knew I had to be strong. Marcus was with me, and as long as we were together, we had a chance. Whatever that thing was, I never want to encounter it again. Be careful out there, especially when going into the Ozark National Forest. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I hope tonight's stories kept you company in the dark. Sleep well, and if you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe. Good night, and see you in the next one.